Hey trainers, and welcome back to another episode of Future Sight, which is, as you know it, a soundproof podcast production. We're back just a week late, and I take full responsibility for that. Before we go into those kinds
That's not really your fault.
Gory details, of course, as always, I am Brendan, and I'm joined by my good friend Jake. You can find us on the internet at MrBDog46 and Major Bowman. I don't know what your actual Twitter handle is.
It's just
but
Major
it's out there
Bowman with an
somewhere.
underscore. You'll find it.
Wait. You'll find it.
The real
But,
Major Bowman's
yeah.
suspended, and I'm upset. Because I want it.
Oh, well, you'll get it eventually, like 3-4 years. Or maybe
I've had
after
this account for 6 years, and it's the whole time been unavailable.
Maybe after Elon buys Twitter. I'm just kidding. So yeah, my computer had its own problems last week, and it took me about a week to get it back online. So here we are. We're back. We've got another exciting match for you today. And I think, interestingly, we are following up 2015 match, which I believe was the last one we did, with a 2018 match, which, in my head, are the two formats that we played that like most closely resemble each other.
Yeah, it's like a 3-year cycle, essentially. It's like 2014 was the like XY regional decks. 2017 was the SM regional decks. And then like 15 was the XY or S like national decks, and then 18 is the same for Sun and Moon. So
yeah,
I think actually with 18 was on Ultra Sun, right? Ultra Sun and Moon. Or is it not? I don't know. Maybe that's it. Doesn't matter. Who cares?
I just have
it was the Alola national deck, so it's
right.
like you have the Megas, you have Z moves in this case. It's basically 2015 with Z moves and Tapus, I would say.
And Ultra Beasts. And Ultra
True,
Beasts.
fair, yeah.
And as we're going to find out this week, Como, which
God.
was at one time in its cycle at least a little influential at certain times. But we have pulled up a match this week, again from 2018, which is the finals of the Roanoke,
Nope.
the Toronto
There we
Regional
go.
Championships.
There's a player that was in both of those.
I was going to say, I think that's why I'm thinking of it. But
Yeah.
yes, we're in the middle of one of James Beck's tour de forces here, which he's had several of over the years. One of them most recently coming just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was in the finals of both of those regionals, and without spoiling, I believe he won Roanoke, correct?
Yep.
Did he win Toronto? I don't know. I
We'll
suppose
find
we're going to
out.
find out today.
He
but
won
yeah,
Daytona
so
later that year. Or later
Yeah,
the
he
next
did.
year or something
Yeah.
like that.
He had a huge, insane season. But anyway, we've got both teams up there, so let's do as we always do and talk a little bit about where we are in the format. Jake already mentioned that this is a national dex format. If you're familiar with 2015, which you must be since you've watched our videos before, you'll know that team construction kind of revolved around like your mega Pokemon and what your selection of mega Pokemon is going to be, and then you kind of fill in the holes from there.
Yeah.
You throw an Incineroar in, and then you can kind of pick your supporting cast. So you can see here that both players have selected Mega Gengar.
Yeah. Gengar was getting pretty big at this time in the format. This was
It
in
was,
May of 2018. I think it was one of the last regionals. Not the last. I know that Madison's always later, but there was probably like 2, maybe 1 after this. So we're getting close to like NAIC time. And I know that Gengar showed up big at NAIC as well. So I think this is kind of when it was on the ramp up. Clearly performing well here, 2 in the final. And it's interesting that these are both like very, very different teams too, centered around Mega Gengar. Although I would wager that Rajan's team really isn't centered around the Gengar. It's Snorlax.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this discourse has been had like multiple times over the year, but Shadow Tag is just like a really freaking good ability. And then you give it to a Pokemon that has like a million stats and pretty good typing, and you get kind of a monster. And on the left, we'll talk a little bit about James's team. You're looking at something that very closely resembles what the Perish Trap archetype of the moment looks like, and I think we actually just had Perish on last week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago or whenever the heck it was. Yeah, but this is kind of what the Perish archetype looked like, which was kind of like it was always like Gengar and Incineroar. There was a lot of Tapu Bulu. Sometimes you'd see Politoed, which is just kind of like an ever-present Perish Pokemon. And Como was actually like kicking around as a Perishmon at this time because of Soundproof.
Yeah.
Branding. Yeah, branding. What's really interesting about James's team is that it's actually not a Perish Trap team, and functions very different in practice, so we'll talk about that a little bit. And then Rajan's team, like you mentioned, Jake, is kind of focused around like various setups, and then just has a Gengar there to sort of like force the board position that you need to get those setups.
It's got like Gengar and Incineroar are really good at that, just because you have Shadow Tag and a Pivot and Intimidate and Fake Out, and with a team like this, it's not really that difficult to force a certain like matchup on the board, and so that's clearly how this kind of team functions. And I know that like Rajan and like Nails and the whole like squad, that group of friends, they always, not always, but they often build teams like that. I know that like Nails won a regional with like, it was a very, very hard Protect the Snorlax team. I think Virginia 17, I think. Snorlax is just one of their favorite Pokemon, I think. I think they built a lot with it. And I also know that they used to, at least at some point in 2017, they were running like Turbolax, which I think was like max speed, max special defense, or something like that.
Yeah,
so
I think
careful.
they invented a whole bunch of different like Snorlax
Yeah.
adaptations.
But one of the cool toys Snorlax got in Sun and Moon was Mimikyu too. They're kind of a match made in heaven, because Mimikyu sets up Trick Room. You have like Z Destiny Bond was really, really common. That's what this set is. And for those unaware, if you use Z Destiny Bond, it acts as like a follow me. So it redirects all attacks towards Mimikyu. It's not priority, so you don't get the priority part, but if Mimikyu is the fastest thing on the field using Z Destiny Bond, it's going to be targeted. Which is great, because it used to have the Destiny Bond effect, which means if it gets knocked out, you also take a knockout yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah, it just goes really well with Snorlax. And you can just say the same for Feeny too. I believe this is Calm Mind type of Feeny. So the same can go there in terms of like aiding setup.
Definitely. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about the Verzian. We discussed this a little bit, but I remember talking to Rajan at the time about, why is this thing on your team? It's not something that hardly ever gets seen in competitive play, and it has like a very specific niche, which is like grass rock coverage and a speed greater than 100. And that's pretty much exactly what it is doing on this team, is that it's there to like threaten Mega Charizard and then Snorlax, and then I don't know, like it probably is like a 3-hit KO on top of it. Like, I don't know. But it's basically just to like one hit, like outspeed and 1-hit KO Charizard.
Yeah.
So I think it shows up in this set, but it's as kind of like a last ditch resort in Game 3, I think. But yeah, so that's why that's there. I think it's always interesting to talk about kind of like the niche Pokemon that you're not expecting to see. So anyway, I'm ready if you are, Jake.
Let's do it.
We'll hit the play button here, and then as we can kind of see a little bit, Gengar is almost always going to be the lead. Like, there's pretty much no reason to like not lead your Gengar.
You just really want Shadow Tag immediately, and like you don't really lose anything by ditching Cursed Body. That's not going to be relevant very often.
Right, once it no longer has Levitate.
Yeah. I think like one of the most important things in Gengar mirrors like this is the speeds. We saw Rajan's Mega Evolve first, which is relevant because, spoiler, James's is actually modest and Rajan's timid.
Right.
So I don't know. Obviously, we can't know if Rajan knew that. I think there's a decent chance he knew that, given how like strong their network is. But it's just that's something that James is gonna know, right? Like if you're running modest Gengar, you pretty much know that you give up the mirror, like the 1v1 mirror in a vacuum.
Right.
And that mirror is kind of volatile, so I think you have to be a little bit careful when you do that. Whoa.
Yeah, so it's already like a pretty volatile mirror, but basically like kind of in every aspect, from information to the point that I'm trying to make is that Clefairy also gives you an edge in this mirror too, is that you can potentially potentially expect to live a Shadow Ball with Clefairy on the field, I believe.
Yeah.
If you're running bulk on the modest set, and then also you just have the advantage of information.
Yeah. To actually talk about what's going on in the game instead of just theory now. I like that Sludge Bomb knockoff, I think was like a decent play in theory, but knowing that Clefairy's on the field, you're not KOing the Gengar like at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe Sludge Bomb knocks out Clefairy with an Eviolite. I bet that's the case. So maybe he was hoping for a follow me, but even then that's kind of a big read to make, like Sludge Bombing the Gengar itself, because I don't know that anything else would switch in there other than maybe Incineroar. And even then, Sledgehammer's
I
still
mean,
not doing a ton.
I mean, you think you hit everything else on the team for neutral damage, right? So I mean, like it's
Yeah.
either a follow me, which potentially knocks out with the Eviolite, and you're at the very least getting like chip damage onto the Gengar, so that like you know that you're never not doing damage with that attack if you like shoot it into a Clefairy Protect.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
whatever
guess that makes
thought
sense.
process is, we could just kind of project.
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But yeah, you kind of see some of the pitfalls of Incineroar when it's not trained with any sort of offense in mind. Obviously, it's knocking off. It's done a good job by knocking off the Eviolite, but it's not doing a lot of damage to Gengar.
I think it usually knocks out. It's probably a bulkier Gengar, and all like Friend Guard is there too. Like from that damage, that might have been enough for knockout. But even then, kind of stuck here. Like if you're Rajan, you bring in Tapu Fini here because you probably don't have something else that does great into Gengar.
Pretty much.
Be it the Snorlax, which I think just runs mono normal move. And so at this point, you're kind of stuck with Tapu Fini being your best Gengar answer. I like that taunt a lot, just because I think it covers the switch into something like a Snorlax. You can't like Belly Drum or whatever. I think this is before it got Parting Shot. That was only in Gen 8.
Oh my gosh.
So you're not stopping that, but at least you're kind of blocking like a possible switch, which I think is fine. I think you're very okay with giving up Gengar that turn, especially with what's just come in. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so Azumarill comes in, and now all of a sudden you've got like the freest setup you've ever seen in your life. Barring some sort of like strange Tapu Fini tech that I can't even like. I don't think
Just
there's any way to
muddy
prevent
water
this
drops.
setup. Yeah, that's it. There you go. So that's pretty much what's going to happen here, and then it's going to be pretty difficult for Rajan down the stretch here to like deal with this Azumarill once it is set up. You know, especially looking at the rest of his team. If Parisian's not there, it's doing like a huge amount of damage to everything that's left.
And presumably, if you're making this play as James, you have Tapu Bulu in the back to deal with the Fini, because that's like the one thing that Azumarill is going to be upset about as a Fini. But Bulu probably comes in here. You threaten with Woodhammer, and you can just opposite the other slot. I do kind of want to touch on like James's team a little bit here. You kind of mentioned it earlier, but this, if you were just to see this 6, you probably aren't expecting Belly Drum Azumarill, because usually they're going to be running, not usually, but kind of a common set with Sap Sipper, Perish Song. It just kind of goes back to hold like James running the Perish Song, like Perish Trap team, but not actually running Perish itself, which I think is a cool fake out. Because obviously, a team like this, kind of similar to Rajan's, you have a very good setup opportunity with Gengar, Incineroar, Clefairy. Azumarill is going to be your only setup, but it's like a game-winning one. Like a +6 attack with Aqua Jet is pretty massive.
There is Parisian, which Rajan has kind of like correctly identified as his only way of dealing with the Azumarill, and it's like not even really going to do a great job of it, I don't think. I think it probably does it K. Oh, well,
with Grassy Terrain,
it does, but yeah.
The issue is I don't know, because I don't think that it's going to win anyway, because it doesn't have good defense at all. Like, its defense is just bad.
Right, it's all in special defense.
Yeah, so even then, you're going to have to eat a Woodhammer and an Aqua Jet, and then even if like you survive both of those, you get knocked out by the next one. And to give it like, I mean, we just saw the type of Foolish Choice Scarf. It's never going to be outspeeding Parisian otherwise. And so that's, I think the tech that was on most of these teams, I think, that just knocks out. Yeah. I think most of these teams are running Choice Scarf Bulu, even the Perish teams, I want to say, just because it gives you like a pretty big damage option. Which
I think some of them were running Snarl and Assault Vest, I think, at some point.
I don't know if they'd run Assault Vest, because then if you're not Scarf, or you're going to want Protect on Perish, right?
Because Snarl Assault Vest was definitely like a thing at some point. Maybe I'm thinking of some other archetype though. I definitely remember seeing that. It was like a flavor of the month type set.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one is obviously Choice Scarf. Yeah.
So in a game like that, I think as soon as James got the Gengar knockout, he kind of knew that he can just position however he wanted to. Giving up the Gengar at like a strategic time, I think is an important part of playing a team like this as well.
For sure.
Just because at a certain point, Shadow Tug has done its job, and even if they still have 3 or even 4 Pokemon left, if you can set a board position at a specific state, you can probably just win the game regardless. And so giving up Gengar like that means that he's able to just force the Azumarill in and Belly Drum and win.
Right. Yeah, so now we're kind of looking at, I mean, that was like pretty straightforward game 1, right? Is that I think you can put reasonably, I mean, and we've talked about this a million times and we always will, is to debate what kind of information is available going into this match. So you can potentially say, like, chalk this one up to Rajan, like, expecting some sort of, like, Perish nonsense going on, in which case, like, U-turn Incineroar plus Gengar is probably, like, a pretty good way to deal with any sort of, like, Perish lead. But, like, clearly was not prepared for the amount of offense or the way that it was presented over the course of the match. So looking at game 2 here, we're giving a little bit of spoilers, but, you know, Mimikyu is kind of one of the things that you'd immediately think about potentially being a good way of, like, at least temporarily handling Gengar or threatening it a little bit. And he's going to go right into it here, plus take the fake out pressure to prevent a follow me on turn 1. So a little bit more of a manageable turn 1 for Rajan here.
Yeah, I think he just has a lot more flexibility here. You still have the option to switch both out, be it with U-turn on Incineroar or just switching the Ghost type Mimikyu. But you do threaten the Gengar more immediately. A lot of Mimikyu run Taunt, which is going to be great into Clefairy. There it is. And it just gives you a lot more options. Just because the Mimikyu now can possibly set up a Trick Room to make way for a Snorlax in the back, if that's what Rajan brought. And especially if we know that the... I don't know what I was going to say there. Never mind.
That's a good point, Jake. Yeah, but when you see Mimikyu at this point, you're almost like definitely. Oh my goodness, I forgot about this.
I love that.
You're
so
almost
cool.
definitely expecting Snorlax in the back. But yeah, so this is a spotlight to basically make it so that Gengar is the one getting taunted instead of Clefairy. And this is like so, like you almost never like there is like I can't. There's no application for the move. Like this is it, and what else?
There is though. Like I know that Spotlight was on a team that this same crew ran at like the Anaheim Open. Because it was a very like Tapu Koko centric team, like Electric. It was Tapu Koko Raichu, Alolan Raichu.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And if you spotlight something, it won't get like. Let's say you have a Feeny next to an Alolan Marowak. If you spotlight the Feeny, you still hit it with the electric move. So there is some pretty cool uses, and I think on a team like
very niche.
Well, even then, like let's say this is Perish. I think if you protect Gengar and spotlight it, you force them to attack into into a protect.
Oh, okay.
Stuff like that.
Okay, I accept that. It is better than it is in my head because I remember thinking this move was really cool when it first came out, and then you find out that the distribution is like the Clefairies and Starmie. I think that's it.
Isn't it Lantern? Was it Lantern? I don't know. Maybe.
I don't think Lantern gets it, but it has like a very strange distribution. You think it's cool at first, and then you find out that there's no distribution, and like the more you think about it, it's pretty hard to justify. But this is like a pretty cool and like really neat use of it to see that. To pass off the taunt, which lets Clefairy continue to do the only thing that it can do. I don't think this one is carrying attacks, and seeing Spotlight makes me think that it's definitely not.
It's not.
Yeah, a really neat use of like a super niche move.
Yeah, I think making good use of the Gengar here, if you're Rajan, you got the Icy Wind off, which, if you don't know that James's Gengar is timid, or is modest, you ensure that you have the speed advantage now. And now it's taunted too, so like, if you have the speed advantage, you can just Shadow Ball that slot. If the Incineroar's in the back, it's not going to take too much, but everything else takes some pretty decent damage from it. And I think now that you know you have the speed advantage, it opens up a lot of options here. Especially given you can potentially like Sludge Bomb Clefairy for a knockout and then get a knockoff without Friend Guard.
Yeah, definitely. That was like a pretty good offensive position for Gengar, but it's also kind of like you have to make the call here. You lose your Gengar to a Shadow Ball, so he's going to play passively and just go into Feeny here. And this is still like a pretty decent position for Feeny. Like it's going to take an okay amount of damage from the Shadow Ball, but it doesn't mind that too much, and without the EVLA, Clefairy is going to get knocked out.
Yeah.
Anyway. But then this is kind of one of the situations where, like, just like in game 1, this is like a pretty free switch into Azumarill. It's a little bit more threatened than it was not having Clefairy next to it, but this is still like Gengar is threatening a knockout onto Tapu Fini, and then depending on the speeds, like Azumarill's going to get to Belly Drum before it gets knocked off too.
Well, the Icy Wind comes in really handy here too, because now that Fini's going to be able to outspeed the Gengar, you get that Moonblast off, which is pretty huge.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And that's not necessarily the case. Like, Fini probably is still outsped by Gengar in a lot of scenarios. Oh, so that actually, so that's what I was saying is it'll come down to the speed. So Azumarill's not Icy Winded, and it's actually a quicker Incineroar or some kind of a speed tie. Yeah.
Well, Azumarill's base like 40 or 50. It's based lower than.
Why do I
Incineroar.
I always think it's 60? Why do I
No.
I always think that?
I think it's 50.
It's like 40. Is it 50 or?
It's 40, somewhere in the 40 to 50 range. I forget.
You know what the other thing is? I always think that Alolan Marowak is 62, and it's definitely not.
No, it's like a weird number, but it's not that. Anyway, that is big. Like, especially because Azumarill didn't go for some like a play rough that turn. Like, if you're able to Moonblast, knock off the Azumarill, that it just eliminates any potential for the Azumarill to like sweep this game. And that's where the Icy Wind paid in a lot of dividends. I'm sure that Rajan knew that Tapu Fini would outspeed Gengar after an Icy Wind. Just because that's the kind of scenario you would like envision when you were playing a team like this. Just
and
like knowing your speed
always
tiers.
Yeah, like their Tailwind, Snorlax, Calyx,
Yeah,
and stuff like
yeah.
that. They know everything. Yeah, so a Never Ending Nightmare, I think this is the first Z move of the game, is going to go into Azumarill and not knock it out because of the Protect, even though that was a critical hit. But Mimikyu is really not like super known for its offense, especially if this is like a Jolly one. It's basically never going to be doing any damage.
The Z move is there more for Destiny Bond. You just have a damage option if you want it. I think. I mean, that knockoff too is really big because now you don't even need to Icy Wind the Bulu for it to underspeed the Gengar. Not that Bulu's going to be doing anything to Gengar anyway, but that just it's one less thing you have to worry about if you're Rajan, and that just sets up the rest of the game really well, I think.
Right. Yeah, and I think Gengar is positioned really well for the end game, and then you also get to go back into your Incineroar here, which will have Fake Out Pressure on Tapu Bulu that we now know is Scarfed. So this is like a pretty good position for Rajan, and he's going to seal it up in the next couple turns here, I believe. And then we're also, I think, going to see another situation that's like a quote-unquote speed tie. I'm not sure if, Rajan is assuming that he's faster or not here, but I think he's definitely in the best position.
At this point, between the Mega Evolving on the same turn, they've attacked on the same turn multiple times. Like, at this point, if you didn't know before, it's probably, like, statistically very safe to assume it's just not a speed tie anymore. And so
yeah, I think we've all been burned by that at least once in our careers.
Yeah, like you win 7 in a row, so you think, oh, it's definitely not a tie, and then you just lose the last one.
You drop one to lose the game, right? Yeah. So the Protect here, what was that? Protect Fake Out or is Incineroar attacking?
It's Flare Blitzing, yeah.
I got lost. There it goes.
I don't think he was going to protect Fake Out the Gengar.
I don't know. I mean, like if he was going to Fake Out the Bulu. That's what I missed. I was distracted. So now it's going to be Shadow Ball to seal the game.
Yeah.
So this game too, I know Jake talked a lot about it, but was kind of sealed up by the Icy Wind in the mid game, which is kind of where Rajan sealed all that momentum. And then the turn where Fini goes before Gengar, and Azumarill loses the opportunity to Belly Drum and also eat its berry at the same time.
Yeah.
Is where the game is just a bit, well, not necessarily sealed up, but that's the big momentum swing here. So now both players have like kind of identified their win conditions, and there's your knockoff calc too, Jake.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder if he protected Gengar deliberately to see how much damage that did.
Yeah, well, he does forfeit the next turn, so it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
It is certainly possible.
Well, no, I meant Rajan, because if you Shadow Ball, you don't get to see how much knockoff does.
Oh, I'm kind of wondering if James was also wondering. Yeah.
Possibly, yeah. Oh, who's that? Ew.
Look how much hair I had.
I think. I mean, the difference I think is just going to be can Azumarill set up.
Yeah.
And like I like that you called out the Icy Wind being like the crux there, because I think the forethought that Rajan had to Icy Wind that turn was huge, because it really just came down to the Fini outspeeding the Gengar. And I think if you're just locked in a position where you're looking at Gengar Clefairy into Gengar Incineroar, I don't know that Icy Wind would be the first thing on my mind, because it doesn't matter for Clefairy and you're already faster with the Gengars. But I think just knowing that he had Icy Winded that one time opened up so many more avenues for him for that mid game, which I think was just a really like heads up play.
Yeah, definitely. But it also did kind of have the feeling of like pulling a trick out of your hat.
Yeah.
Is that the phrase? Like pulling a rabbit out of your hat? Like pulling a trick from up your sleeve. That's the phrase I'm looking for.
Pulling a rabbit out of your sleeve.
Like, the pulling a rabbit out of your pants. I don't like, it's something like that. But it kind of gives, it feels like that was kind of like maybe one of the only win conditions that he had, barring like playing really, really, really well. And now that it's revealed and all the relevant speed tiers are kind of revealed so that James knows like how he can play the turn that he has Azumarill out on the field. We saw that Moonblast do a lot of damage too, which I thought was interesting because Azumarill's pretty bulky. So that kind of situation is almost like definitely never going to present itself again now that James has the information. So we're back to like maybe not the drawing board, but Rajan knowing that he's probably going to have to find a different way to win game 3 if he's going to win game 3.
I do think that Mimikyu is a really good option for Rajan.
Yeah,
like specifically
really
over the
super
Verzian.
Well yet.
Right. Like I think Verzian's fine if you're scared that Azumarill's going to be able to set up. Like if you know for a fact that Azumarill is going to be able to set up, it makes sense. But I think that if you're Rajan here, the Verzian's going to be largely useless against everything else, and I think you would rather play for preventing the setup than mitigating it once it's happened, which is what happened in game 2. He played with a don't let it set up instead of deal with it afterwards.
Yeah, and I think if you feel like you have the tools to do so, then you definitely should. And I think that like Gengar plus Mimikyu should be like in theory. Plus you've got like Incineroar kicking around where you can like maybe burn one turn with a fake out or something like that. I feel like you should have enough tools to prevent it as long as you're like playing with it in mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're to game 3 here. Rajan is going with the double ghost lead, which I always used to think was really cool, and James obviously is not deviating, knowing that he's gonna like have the advantage in pretty much every Gengar mirror here from his Gengar Clefairy lead, where he kind of had like this lead forces Rajan to try and like figure out what he's gonna do, and I think he's been playing it really well.
It's just a very like flexible spot for James to be in. Just because you know that your Gengar has that safety, it's not going to get knocked out by one Shadow Ball, or one Sludge Bomb rather. And so you give yourself options with this lead, whereas if you let something else, it's pretty likely that you're going to have to worry about stomaching a Shadow Ball without the Clefairy protecting it.
Right. Definitely. And then here he's just going to go ahead and like trade Clefairy for Gengar. And we've seen it before, but like sacking Clefairy with Gengar still on the field is going to give him the opportunity to like find his offensive footing here.
Yeah.
Whether or not he wants to try with the Azumarill again, whether or not he wants to bring in Tapu Bulu, which seems like kind of a bad idea, but it is going to be Azumarill. And then, you know, knowing that Taunt is there, there's not really a whole lot of damage on the field. The only option is really to just try and knock off the berry and hope for the best.
Well, I think the Mimikyu has Taunt.
Right, but Gengar's going to be able to taunt it first. No?
Oh, you're right. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
It's a good point. It's interesting, though, because I think if you taunt the Mimikyu as Gengar, you risk a bunch of damage being thrown out, too.
Right.
I kind of like this play just to kind of suss out what Rajan has to do here. There's not really much that can happen that would, like... There's nothing that can go wrong if you double protect. Like, if Trick Room goes up or something, then you can just Belly Drum before taunt. Or, I don't know, there's not a lot to lose. And you, 1, burn Fake Out, and 2, kind of get an idea of what he might want to do this turn.
Yeah, that Shadow Claw was actually not really what I expected, but I guess that's what you were saying about the potential for, like, the taunt play, which is, like, you just trade damage onto Gengar.
Yeah.
If you catch the taunt.
Right.
Mimikyu is actually going to go out with its Disguise intact, which is always important, especially when there are like priority moves out on the field. And then interestingly, James is just going to start throwing out damage with his Azumarill instead of trying to set up.
I think that's a fair play, like
with the knockout in mind, or the knockoff in mind. Yeah,
because especially like a lot of Mimikyu are running Sash, but obviously we've seen this one being Ghostly, and so you know that that's a knockout, the Disguise Break plus the Shadow Ball. And I think if you're thinking, you know, it's going to be impossible for me to stop both of Taunt and Knockoff this turn, like, belly drumming is not a good idea. And so at that point, it's kind of how can I use a Azumarill effectively if it's not going to be setting up at all this game.
Yeah, and here he does not go for the knockoff, so if this is a belly drum, it's like a huge moment in the game, right?
Yeah.
And he does pull it off, like, in the face of knockoff. So he does not have the, or wait, did he?
It's already knocked off.
It got knocked off. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the play. So he goes for the belly drum anyway, which was actually like in hindsight. Okay, I forgot that the citrus berry had already been knocked off. But basically, Gengar is pinning Tapu Fini. Incineroar can't knock out Azumarill, I think, from that position,
No.
and now it's just gonna get to go for a play rough into something, presumably, right?
Yeah, I just think that was like the term when Mimikyu and Incineroar were both on the field. I don't think belly drumming was an option that turn, but once you got the Tapu Fini and Incineroar off, like at that point, the Fini will get knocked out by Sludge Bomb, so it's not going to be threatening a Moonblast. The Incineroar can knock off if it wants to, but it does no damage. You can still belly drum and be healthy. And at this point, you don't really need to be play roughing. If you just Aqua Jet something, it probably gets knocked out. And so that was like a really optimal time for Azumarill to belly drum. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna talk about how we don't really see it too much, but to use non-Z, Destiny Bond was like a really neat play to prevent the Aqua Jet. So if you are still knowing that you need your Azumarill to Aqua Jet at least one time to knock out Incineroar, then that's probably what you have to do.
Yeah.
It's like something like a Sludge Bomb plus Aqua Jet, or like Superpower, or -1 Superpower plus Aqua Jet is going to be like kind of your way of knocking out Incineroar, but you definitely can't sack it there, even if it's for Mimikyu, because Mimikyu's already like not really doing anything here.
Thank you for calling that out. That completely slipped my mind, because the way Destiny Bond works, it applies until you attack again. So even though the Azumarill belly jumped after the Destiny Bond, if you were to Aqua Jet, Mimikyu wouldn't have gone yet, and so it would have traded the knockouts there. Yeah, that was a really smart play.
Yeah, and you almost never see that, which I thought why it was really cool.
It was smart for both of them though. It was smart for Rajan and Destiny Bond there, but it was good for James to recognize like you said, I probably need this Azumarill to get an Aqua Jet off and Incineroar to knock it out. It doesn't need to be +6 because the Aqua Jet puts it in range system like a superpower. And so, yeah, I think it was a really fun set to watch, I think.
Yeah, and whipping out, I don't think I would have ever expected just like a naked Destiny Bond to be the play, because it's just something that you so rarely are thinking of. And then I think one of the other things that's really interesting about the way that endgame ended up playing out in relation to Destiny Bond is that I feel like there are very few situations in these endgames, especially at a high level, where you're actually like checking somebody's game knowledge. And it's not to say that like I wouldn't have expected James to know that that's the way that the mechanic works, but there are like players that don't know that. So that you could have potentially exploited a knowledge gap to just kind of like win the game there. But James is up to the task there, as he has been basically for his entire career. He's like one of the best players of all time at this point.
I forget how many regionals he's won. I know he won 2 in 18, and then he won Daytona in 19.
Yeah, he's got 3 or 4, I think.
Yeah,
right?
there might be
he's
one
not
more.
He's not pushing the Wolf Chua record,
Not yet,
but
no.
he's like in a pretty comfortable second place, I believe, at this point, right?
I think Aaron Zhang has like 5 or 6 too.
Does he?
Yeah, he's got a lot. Regardless, obviously James, fantastic player. This was the second of his at least 3 regional wins, and the second this year too. And he also went on to actually I don't know if he did well at NAIC that year, but he's had international results obviously past that. Worlds a month or 2 ago, NAIC in 2019,
and he had a previous Worlds top 4 too.
Yeah, so
this is his second Worlds top 4, which is insane.
Yeah,
totally insane. Yeah. 2 Worlds top 4s, yeah. And with the same archetype, basically, it's both restricted formats, which I think is another funny thing. All right, I think that's it. Sorry again for being late. My computer's fixed now, though, which is really cool. So we're gonna get back on our bi-weekly schedules, and as always, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, recommendations, compliments, we like those. You can leave them in the YouTube comments. You can find us on Twitter. I think my Twitter's private now, but like I don't know if you follow requests. Anyway. So you can find us there. We love recommendations. We usually fight for like most of the week about who's gonna have to pick the match. So if you are able to like take us out of our lovers' quarrel, that would be great. And yeah, that's it. If not, we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks always for your support.
Bye.